Good morning, good morning. It is 9 a.m. Monday morning, so it must be Make It Happen Monday. For those that are new to the show, I'm Cheryl Andrews, also known as the Listening Detective, and I listen to help you get clarity of what you want and the confidence to make it happen. And this show is all about sharing stories and strategies that will inspire you to listen to yourself and trust your own unique way of being in the world. So without any further ado, today's episode is all about how to make good decisions. We've talked, this month is all about confidence. And one of the things that consistently comes up with my clients is having confidence in their decisions. So today I want to talk to you about the 3 Ps: patterns, process, and progress. And I want to just tell you a little bit of a story really about where these insights have come from, the kind of people that I'm working with, and how I've learned about this. And then I want to finish the show by asking you some questions about what you'd like to have happen, how you need to be, and what support you might need to set yourself up for success. If that sounds like the sort of thing that you'd want to find out more about, then please stay tuned, whether you're watching on replay or live. I do appreciate your comments. It always is great to get feedback, and you might find out why as we go through this process. So the backstory is, as a coach, my job is people come to me often when they're stuck. Often they're frustrated, and they'll tend to have 2 states. Either they're overwhelmed and they've either got loads of problems and they don't know where to start, or they're overwhelmed because they've got loads of wonderful ideas and you don't know which one to do first. So they have to make a decision where they're going to start. And for so many people, the thing that's going to help you make a good decision is to take some time out to think about it. Decisions that, as patterns, if I've worked with clients, the decisions that are often not such great decisions are usually the ones where they've been made in a rush, or they haven't really thought about it, and they've almost, particularly if they want to change a pattern of behavior, they might go on autopilot and do what they normally do. So for example, let's say you've made the decision that you are going to exercise every day. And then on autopilot you get in the car, whereas actually your plan and your intention was, and the decision was, that you're going to walk to the shops instead of taking the car, for example. Or you decide you're not going to have dessert, and then suddenly you're at the restaurant, and on autopilot you're looking at the dessert menu and you decide to have a dessert. So sometimes the reason we don't act on our decision is because we run on autopilot and we're trying to change patterns of behavior. So people come to me often to drill down and get clarity. Now, the fact that they've spent an hour or maybe 90 minutes talking about what they want to have happen, and because I work with the process clean language, I reflect their words back to them. They not only think it and say it, they then get to hear it out externally. They often develop a metaphor or a representation. They may write down what they want to have happen. That time invested in getting clarity of what they want is something that then embeds it into their system, so that their system remembers that we're not going to do that behavior now, we're going to go and do this behavior. So one of the patterns is that once you take time and you ask yourself questions and you get some way of feeding that back to yourself, whether you hear it back to you because somebody else repeats it to you, whether you see it on a piece of paper and you can visually see it, it's why people say it's so effective and so important to write your goals down or have vision boards, or they are all to do with the biggest reason why people don't act on their goals or their decisions, in my experience, is they've just forgot that's what they were supposed to be doing, or that's what they wanted to be doing. So the first thing is to have clarity of what you want to have happen. And I would say 80% of the time when I worked with people, or when I work with people now, I can do a power hour with somebody or a 90-minute session with somebody, and just talking out is enough for them to make the decision about what they want to do. And then they take action, they do something, and they often then get feedback that something has changed or something is different, or they've got the outcome they want, and then they have confidence. But over the years, I started to get really curious about what was the difference between the people who did what they said they were going to do and the people who didn't. And so people who have absolute clarity of what they want, they're saying what they mean, They mean what they say, and they're not being mean to themselves. They're not in drama. They're not blaming or accusing. They have taken time to think about what they want to have happen. Those people, if they don't do what they say they're going to do, it's often because they lack confidence. And how it often showed up in the conversations I was having with clients is they would say things like, oh, I'm just not very good at making decisions, or I'm not very good at planning, or I'm not very good at managing my time. And so they would lose confidence in their self and this ability to have the thing that they wanted, whether that was to change the way that they approach their business, whether it's the way they change the way they approach a relationship, whether it's doing sales calls, networking, follow-up calls in the business. The actual thing varied from person to person. But the pattern that was consistent is that when they didn't take action, they lost confidence in themselves. And often the most common thing for them to criticize themselves for was either they started to doubt their original decision, or they started to doubt their ability to plan to make it happen, or they started to doubt their ability to actually manage their time. And when you break down managing your time, when you really get into the nuances of all that, ultimately time management is about a series of decisions. So let's say you've planned to spend the day working on your book, might be my thing for looking at the moment. You're going to have a day to write. But then my son comes in and he's got a question about his mortgage. He's buying a house and he needs to know he can get this free sofa, and can he fit it in the living room, and how can we, that he's got questions for me. It would be very easy for me to make a decision, consciously or unconsciously, to not do what I was doing and then go and help him. And when we talk about time management, ultimately it is always about how we decide in the moment to use our time. Now, for those who've got clarity of what they want, and they have confidence in themselves and the process, and maybe even are really, really committed to a deadline, and particularly I find those people will do it for work. They'll be really good at saying no to people to get work stuff done, but maybe wouldn't be so good to say no to people if they had to do something for themselves. Maybe they wanted to eat well, or take out some time to meditate, or just time to just catch up with themselves, catch a breath. They'd be really good at making the decision to say no to other people for stuff if it was for making money, or it was for a client, or something they were going to let somebody else down, but not so good at making that decision if it was just for themselves. So when I started to unpack with people, how do you make a good decision, which is what this video is really going to focus on, what we noticed was there was three things, the 3 Ps. One of the most common patterns, and I have written them down just to remind myself, is that I just want to check my notes actually, because I want to keep to this. It's because I want this. I made the decision to write this all out this morning so I could actually try and keep on track, and now I've lost my flow. But the most common patterns were that the decision they had made was right at the time, but something had changed. So let's say, for example, I make the decision that my priority today is to write my book. But then one of my children isn't well, or my husband has an emergency, or my parents call me, or, there's something going on. My business and my book writing no longer is the priority when there's something with my family, because I am the first port of call in our family generally. And my husband earns more money than me, so we tend to protect him and his business and his work, and I tend to be the one that's more flexible. Okay, so what I found with people when they start unpacking their decision making, one of the patterns is that actually the decision was the right decision at the time, but then something changes. Okay, so that's the first thing to think about, your own decision making model. Was it right at some point in the past, but has new information become present? So also, I made the decision to send my book off to the editor in February 2020. When it came back, I wasn't happy with it, not because of what the editor did to it, but because I'd had some space and time away from it. I saw it in a new perspective. I saw it in a new light, if you like. And it just didn't feel right. There was something about it that wasn't right for me. And then the pandemic happened. And so even though I wanted to revisit the book and I want to get onto it, actually, there was a whole load of people out there that needed my support, and I knew what I was writing about would be of value, because Do, Delegate or Ditch book is about how you make decisions, how you set yourself up for success, and how you manage your stress levels. It's kind of all of those things, and the whole world was going through that. And I'd been self-employed working from home for 22 years. I really felt that it was my duty to show up and provide support in whichever way I could, which meant I had to learn a whole load of new stuff to put the Do, Delegate or Ditch as an online program rather than a 2-day retreat with online support for 90 days, which is what it had been for the last 10 years. So I switched my focus. So I want you to think about your decisions. Quite often, the thing that we make a decision, if we don't act on it, then the likelihood is maybe something has changed, and it means our priorities have changed. So it was a good decision back then in that time frame, but now that something's different, something's changed, it's no longer the priority. So it's not that we made a bad decision, it was just the good decision in that moment, and now things are different. So that's one pattern. The other pattern was that they have a pattern of making decisions that are often in service of other people. So they would do things, when they look at their decision-making model, it'd be like, in my case, my children ask me for things to do. I'm protecting my husband's time because he's the main wager of the family. And it would all be great for everybody else, but it wasn't necessarily always good for me. And when I unpacked my own decision-making model, what I realized is, if you said to me, what would you like to have Cheryl? What would you like to have happen, Cheryl? Quite often when I said what I would like to have happen, I might say, I'd like to have a family day out where everybody's happy, or I'd like to do whatever. Nearly always, when I mapped it out, it was based on what I'd heard my children wanted, what I heard my clients wanted, what I heard my team wanted, what my husband wanted, what our parents wanted. One day I even looked at my decision-making model and I discovered I was even unconsciously considering a complaint. I was sat in a queue in the fish and chip shop and somebody was moaning about somebody parking. And even when I was setting up an event of mine, I was considering that where this person did or didn't want people to park. And so I'm really good at listening to all of those things and bringing together a solution that seems to, and it's only seems to, give everybody what they want. But that meant that quite often when I made a decision, it wasn't including what I wanted. In fact, I often didn't know what I wanted beyond other people being okay. And that's quite a big pattern, a common pattern that I've noticed with people. And it often is absolutely the way it needs to be, particularly if you're a parent or you're running a business and you've got a team to look after, you've got clients to look after. There is a percentage of your decision making that is very externally referenced, and it is in service of other people. However, you are likely to lose confidence or even lose your health and your well-being and your ability mentally and physically to carry out and act on your decisions if consistently over time your decisions do not include what you need to work, learn and live at your best. And what I was discovering is that what I needed was a bit more alone time. I needed time to be able to think about what I wanted. But when I used to have time on my own, I'd feel lost and I'd feel uncomfortable and I'd feel like, it felt really weird being on my own. So then I'd have feelings and I would label them as lonely. But actually, I started to realize quite quickly that it was because it was such a change for me. It felt uncomfortable and unfamiliar. So even though it's what I wanted, I would lose confidence with it. And so it took me time to just give myself 5 minutes doing something I wanted to do. And eventually, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've now got a list of lovely hobbies that I've got, whether it's watercolor painting or crocheting or walking in nature or exercising or writing books, that when I get the opportunity and I give myself that time to be on my own, I actually have something to do that brings me joy. Whereas quite often when I make the decision to have time on my own, which is because I now was starting to update my decision-making model to include what I wanted, I'd then have time on my own. But because it was such a big change, it would feel very uncomfortable. And it took me time to actually work out what I was going to do with that time. So one of the patterns is that your decision-making was right at one point, but something has changed. The second thing is that your decision-making may not include your own needs. And therefore, it's okay and you can act on it for a certain period of time, but you'll start to lose confidence just because you become fatigued or exhausted. or depleted, because you're not making decisions that include what you need to work, learn and live at your best. And for me, that was definitely about learning to be okay with time alone. And the third thing that happened patterns wise was that people would make decisions that it's what they wanted. They had the confidence to do it, but what they hadn't considered was the impact it was going to have on other people. So I see this quite a lot with in my Slimming World days, but also when I'm with small business owners. So let's say, use my example, but also I can think of clients where you talk to a coach, you go, I've made the decision, I'm going to do this with my business, I'm going to do this with my business, and I'm going to do this. And you go home and you tell your family or your friends about it, and they go, oh, and they have this kind of what you might call a negative reaction or response. And what has happened is that it always is great and exciting in your head, and it's really lovely. But what you haven't anticipated is the impact it's going to have on other people. So if I were to say to my husband, right, I've decided that I'm going to get a full-time job, I'm going to be out of the house from 8 till 5 every day, because I want to earn this money. He will have, might have more money coming in, perhaps, potentially. He might, but I do cook all the lunches, and or at least I plan them and I shop for them, and I do all the evening meals, I do a cooking, and I am here, which means I guard him and his time, because I can answer questions with the children or neighbours or whatever else is going on. I can answer the door when parcels are coming in. His time is very much guarded. And so if I suddenly wasn't in the house, that would impact him. And he might also just genuinely miss me, because we're used to working quite closely as a team. And so I found that what happened with people is that if they had real clarity of what they wanted, they had confidence, that they would often lose confidence when they got feedback from other people. But what they hadn't really appreciated was that they needed to be able to listen to other people, because they may have an adverse reaction. They might be sad or angry or cross or, just confused, or they might go through some kind of emotional response, because what you're going to do is going to change their environment, is going to change their system. And they haven't chosen that. It wasn't a conscious decision. You're now imposing that decision on them, and therefore it's going to impact you. And what I saw time and time again is that when people made decisions that were either they didn't include their own needs, or they didn't include the impact it was going to have on other people. And ultimately, what all of that required was the ability to listen to yourself, to work out what you want, be able to ask yourself questions and give yourself feedback. And then when you tell other people what you want to do, you have to be able to listen to the other person, ask questions to understand, given that I'm going to be going through this change and I really love you and I want you to be okay, what needs to happen for you to be okay with this decision? And it might be they just need to be left alone to think about it, be given time to process their emotions. So that's the first of the 3 Ps. It's the pattern. So, it was right at the time, but maybe something's changed. It was right for other people, but it wasn't always right for you. So it's making sure that you've included yourself and what you need to be resourced to work and live at your best. And the other thing was that maybe it was really right for you, and it fits everything that you need to be at your best, but you're now going to evoke a change on the people that you work and live with. And therefore you hadn't considered and hadn't included in your decision-making process the impact and the conversations you might want to have with the people who's going to be directly impacted by your decision. So that's one of the main patterns. In terms of process, which is the second P, people who had absolute clarity of what they wanted, and they were making decisions, and they were really happy with, they understood it's going to, maybe their partner wouldn't be very happy with it, or their children wouldn't be very happy with it, or their clients wouldn't be happy with it, or their team wouldn't be very happy with it, or they would be ecstatic about it, whichever the outcome is. If they made a decision that included what they needed to be at their best, and it was right for right now, and they'd also knew it'd be right for the short term, medium, or long term, or they just understood it was only a short term decision, then if they didn't do something, if they didn't take action, and we unpacked, why they were lacking confidence now to act on their decision, it nearly always came down to not having clarity of the process, i.e., I want to make 100,000, or I want to build a new website, or I want to have a better relationship, or with food or time, or my husband or my family or my children, whatever the outcome is, the decision, I want to this. They weren't sure of the process of how to get from where they are now to where they want to be. And so that required taking time to map the process out. So actually going, okay, so you want to be here. So let's say I want to have more gratitude for life. And where you are now is you're complaining every 5 minutes about everything and everyone, and you're really miserable and fed up. What happens between being miserable and fed up and having real gratitude for everything that you have got in your life? And so it's actually thinking about what is the process. And so in my experience, the people who did what they said they were going to do, once they'd worked out what they wanted, those people who took action, it was because they already had done that process before. So say, for example, someone says they want to earn more money. They go, oh, I know I haven't been doing for ages. I haven't sent any follow-ups out to any of my existing clients. I haven't told them I'm putting an order in, or I haven't told them there's an event coming up. Or it's like, oh, I've been through this process before. I know what to do in order to make that thing happen. So although there may be a gap from being, complaining a lot to being grateful, if you've done it before, then you're more likely to just do it, just get on and do it. But those who didn't do it, either they didn't know the process, so they didn't know what it is. So therefore, using coaching, they were asked questions to map out. So what could be the first thing that needs to happen? And what I discovered when I really started mapping processes out with people, the most common thing was that people would forget and not give it credit for or acknowledge the time that's required for what I aptly name the invisible tasks. So to go from complaining to real gratitude for everything in your life, you may have to go through some time where you grieve and you allow yourself to be sad for the things that you cannot have, that you no longer have, or the loss of something. So it might be, you might have had an actual bereavement, but maybe you didn't get the success that you wanted in your business, or maybe you didn't get the kind of love and connection you wanted in a relationship. So the first bit might be to sit with and acknowledge and name and accept and appreciate that actually it's sad that you can't have those things. The next step might be in the process is decide consciously that you're going to ditch those feelings, let them go, in order to create space for the gratitude to come in. You might need to go through a process of actually learning how to talk to yourself with love and kindness, so that your brain is not constantly stressed and exhausted. And that's my book, Manage Your Critic from Overwhelmed to Clarity, takes people through a 7-step process so that you go from being really critical of yourself to telling yourself a story that basically allows your system to start to operate again from a place of curiosity. Because we can't think with clarity and we can't make decisions when we're putting ourselves down and criticizing our situation, our circumstances, and criticizing other people, because that creates stress chemicals, which limits our time perspectives and limits our ability to make decisions. So what's often missed in the process is that we need time to think. We need time to process our emotions, to name them, acknowledge them, and simply to let them work through our system. Emotion and feelings are temporary and transient. They come and they go, but they'll keep coming back often if they don't feel heard or understood. And so you might find yourself repeating the same story over and over again. But if you don't give yourself time to think about it, and you don't give you time to acknowledge how you feel about stuff, often you'll get stuck in this story of the woe is me, it's not right, it's not fair, and in blame. But it's because you haven't stopped to listen to how you think or feel, and haven't stopped to ask that feeling, anger or disappointment or sadness, what it would like to have happen. And in most cases, when I go through that process with clients, mostly that emotion wants to be heard by you, the person who's feeling it, wants you to acknowledge that's how you feel. And sometimes when it's a scary thing to admit, so maybe you're jealous or you're resentful or whatever you're experiencing, maybe you're not comfortable with those kinds of thoughts or those feelings. Sometimes having somebody to listen to you, like a coach like myself, or even a good friend that can listen without judgment, without criticism, and they can witness your experience and honor it as this is how you think and feel right now. Often that is all that needs to happen for the emotion to be released, to be ditched, to let go of. So thinking about the process, there's often that bit about how you feel. It's the asking questions, giving time for the actual information to settle, giving time for information to embed, for you to remember it. So if you decide you want to do a new kind of behavior, you might need to practice that. You might need warning, post-it notes everywhere reminding you this is what you wanted, because it's a new way of behaving. And it may take time to embed and remind yourself, but that is part of the process. So if you start off with being a complainer and you want to get to gratitude, the first thing might be to notice how much you're complaining and notice what you're complaining about. And then each thing that you're complaining about, asking that thing what it would like to have happen. And if there's loads of things you're complaining about, then it might take you time to work out which is your priority, and you're going to work on this one. But what is often missed is that is part of the process. It's almost like people lose confidence because they're not instantly being grateful for everything, as an example, or instantly making money, or instantly feeling absolutely loved and wowed by their relationship, because they want to go from where they are now to where they want to be, like that. And those people who do that, I have had it happen. I can witness the change happening straight away in a session. It does happen, but it's usually for those people who've been through that process before. And the minute they make a decision that that's what they've got to do, because their system already knows how to do it because they've done it before, they just work through almost go through the process instantly in their head, and they're there and they go, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. And they can ditch all that stuff. But if you've never done it before, or you're not consciously aware of how you did it, then you might need to work out your process in order to get from where you are now to where you want to be. So the first thing is to remember that thinking and asking questions, maybe doing some research, particularly when I work with authors, there's a lot of stuff at the beginning, and they're often going to want to write a book. So they want to go from an idea of a book to a written book. But the invisible bit, that, thinking about the idea, having conversations with people, going back through your case studies, thinking about it, all doesn't always seem to show any evidence that you've done any work. And so one of the things to remember about the process is there's often these invisible things. Maybe you start to feel a little bit more confident about the book, or you may feel a bit more confident about going out and doing sales calls or follow-ups, whatever. But maybe how you feel inside is the thing that starts to change first. And it may not show evidentially outside that something different has happened, but change will be happening, and it's part of that process. And it's often when and particularly if we're delegating and we're asking, friends or families, you might say to your children, or, right, I want you to do clean your bedroom up now, right? So the child's playing their game, or they're reading their book or watching their program, and you've told them they've got to go and do their bedroom, and they don't look like they're moving and they're not doing anything. And they may not have heard you, or maybe they are ignoring you. That's also factually correct as well. It could be the case. Hello, good morning, Doris. But also they might be, that, have you ever had it when someone asks you something and it takes a little while? I call it landing. It's just my metaphor. Maybe you've got a different way of describing it. But I've heard someone say something, but it just takes a moment before it actually lands and makes sense to me. And I have to kind of process it. We were having this conversation about, we're playing the game over Christmas called Hum That Tune, and you get given the title of a song. Well, it takes me a while to work out, do I even know the song? Can I recall the tune? Often I can't, by the way. And once I've got the tune in my head, I think, well, I know that one, like ABBA, Dancing Queen, I know that. There's a massive gap between getting it from my head out of my mouth, and then often what comes out of my mouth sounds nothing like Dancing Queen, ABBA. But that thinking process is part of the process of change. And so what I know when I've worked with people who are questioning whether they're making good decisions is they often are judging that they haven't made a good decision because they haven't taken action, but actually they have been. They've been doing the thinking, they've been doing the processing, they've been adjusting how they feel about things. So if you've made a decision and you feel like you're not acting on it, maybe you are, and you just don't know that yet. And you'd have more confidence in yourself if you actually mapped out what happens between having decided and actually making it happen. And think about the things that maybe you'd have to go more inwardly, maybe to notice what's happening inside. Maybe you might be feeling more fearful or less fearful. But you may have to go through those emotional changes because the thing you're going to do is going to involve a change. The second thing that happened, and I'm aware of coming up to 1:30, but with your love and kindness, I'm going to carry on, because actually, as I'm talking this through, I'm actually getting the clarity that I need for my book so I can get it written. So the second thing that happens in the process, in my experience, is once people know the process, they can start to take action. But the most common pattern that come out was that people, if the process was going to involve learning something new, they often had a fear of failure, and this felt like they're being tested. And so they had lost somewhere along the journey of life this curiosity, and this is experimental, like, actually, I want to go from complaining to gratitude, is my example, or I want to go from an idea of a book to a book written. But they had lost that sense of playfulness where they could go, well, I'm going to try this idea out and see what kind of feedback I get. Or I'm going to try doing this kind of thing first and see if that works. Or I'm going to do, and they may even get somebody else's process. Someone else might teach them a process of how to get from one to the other. I'm reading the book Magic at the moment, which is a 28-day process for more gratitude. And some of the activities that are in there, I wasn't able to do it the way they told me to do it straight away. And so rather than feeling a failure, like I haven't done it correctly, I just did the next best thing I could. So I was having a conversation with someone today. One of the activities is put a photograph of somebody and thank them on a daily basis. Well, I didn't have a photograph of that person, but I could visualize them in my head really clearly. And so I trusted my own process and trusted that if the purpose is to see this person and to thank them for everything they've ever done for me and with me, then I could do that without the physical picture. So if you have a fear of failing and you have to do things, just have to be perfect, then I would say that sometimes the reason we start to doubt our decision isn't because the decision is wrong. It's because the process of getting from where we are now to where we want, i.e. acting on the decision, is going to involve experimenting, testing and measuring, playing with ideas. And actually, if you have a fear of failure, you almost hold yourself back from being playful and trying things out, and therefore don't do anything, and therefore don't take action. And what you end up doing is doubting whether the decision was right, whereas actually the decision's absolutely fine. What's missing is your confidence to learn new things, your confidence to believe that you can do it. And that might be because you've, failed a test or didn't do well at school, or, whatever your experience is. I know for me, I went, and sometimes I'm always in learning state, and sometimes I just need a break from learning. And so again, it might be timing. Maybe that wasn't the decision is right, but it's not the right time for me to go and learn something new at the moment, because my brain's been doing a lot of learning. But it's just recognizing with yourself, what's your relationship with learning? Do you have a fear of failing, or do you love learning? Do you like being playful? And the last one that comes under the confidence sort of thing with the process is often there will come a point in a process where you cannot do it all yourself. And so what I discovered is when people started mapping the process out, if it involved learning or it involved asking for help, they were the two most, and the invisible tasks, they were the three reasons why people were getting stuck in the process. And often that meant they had to learn how to ask for help. Because it might be that they do need to learn something and they need to have someone teach it to them, or they may not have enough time. They know how to do it. They're really confident. They've been through the process. They've learned it all. They know exactly how to do it, but they just don't have the time to do it. They physically do not have the time to action on what needs to happen. So they need to ask someone else to do it for them. And so that then becomes a whole process of learning how to trust other people, allowing them to do it in their own way, but know the outcome will be okay. And so at the end of this thing, what I'm hoping you're gaining from today's video is that what seems like a really simple process, let's go from being complaining to gratitude, for example. I know for me, it was actually when someone gave me this book and I was part of a group. Having some feeling of group up so that I'm holding myself accountable with other people and actually teaching it to them, by teaching that's helping me embed it. That's my learning process. So I learn it and then I teach it. That's how I will really embed this process. So when people come to me with their questions, it helps me to learn it even better. That's a process for me. But also, there are times when actually I need to ask for help. So I've had to ask for the group because what I need to hear from other people is sometimes different from what I need to hear from myself. I know that when I started going to build my confidence up, I needed to hear from other people what they valued about me. And ironically, they've got Doris on the call live today. And I've been very grateful to meet people who just naturally, without me having to ask them, what do you love about me? What makes me different? People like Doris just naturally go, oh, what I love about you is this, and what I really appreciate about you is this. So they're really good at the gratitude, you might notice here. They can give me that feedback, and I was pretty good at noticing and identifying other people, how they were adding value to my life and showing them gratitude. But what I wasn't so good at doing is showing gratitude for myself. And I often needed help. I needed people around me that could identify it. Now, when I had to ask for that early on in the journey, it felt quite needy. And some people used to say, oh my God, you're quite needy, aren't you? Why do I have to keep telling you how lovely you are? And it was like, okay, they're not the right people for this job. And therefore you have to go through that process of learning and experimenting and being playful until you get a tribe of people around you. I'm now very fortunate to probably have about 6 or 8 people in my life who I work with sometimes and I see sometimes, don't see them all the time. But when we see each other, the nature of the relationship is that we have huge gratitude for each other, and we will verbalize what we love about each other and how we really appreciate those people. And so it took time to get to that place of gratitude. And often that's the big thing with the process. People want quick results and don't recognize that it's a process you have to go through, that it's iterations that you build up. So on the 3 processes, then, the things that are often missed out were invisible tasks, the sort of stuff you feel or the think that don't show, you can't see it on the outside, but it's all happening on the inside. The other one is fear of failure and their relationship with learning, and having to reconnect with actually being curious and being playful with experimenting until they find what works for them. And the last one was this fear of asking for help. Maybe past experiences meant they felt let down or disappointed and they didn't want to go through that. So actually learning how to ask for help was often part of that process. And then the third thing that we talk about, 3 Ps, and I'm way over on the half an hour. Even though I said last week I was going to definitely keep to half an hour, I'm going to undo that because I'm being a bit selfish in that I need to, I want to, and I need, in order to get this book written, to verbalize this for you. So those who are still here with me, I thank you and I really appreciate you. But hopefully this will be useful to you and you can come back to it if it's too long for you at this moment. Progress. One of the big things about losing confidence in our decision making is that we actually don't identify that progress is being made. We feel like nothing is happening, and we'll say things like, I don't feel like we're making any progress. I don't feel like anything's changed. But when I map out the process with somebody about what has happened between the last conversation we've had and now, absolutely always there's been some of those invisible tasks. They've been becoming aware of their fear of failure and their difficulty with confidence to learn new things. They may have become aware that they need to ask for help, but they don't know who to ask. And they're not seeing that becoming aware of how they feel or becoming aware of tasks as a part of progress. It's like they're only going to measure progress when they get to the finish line, when they're absolutely, whether you're going from idea to book publish, it's like until I've written a chapter or until I've got a book in my hand, or until I'm fully grateful for a whole day without complaining any time today, like they weren't, it's until the completed change was there. It's almost they wouldn't acknowledge any progress. And so one of the things really for me was about asking people to start to notice the smallest of changes, and to celebrate those changes and to recognize progress, that, having those invisible reflecting times is part of the process. Having fear and having to manage your emotions and listen to your emotions is all part of the process. Having to regain your composure and get to a place of learning and curiosity when you're stressed and scared and it's unfamiliar and it's not comfortable is all part of that process. And if you know the process that you go through and you understand, so for me, if I'm going through change, I need to first of all be conscious that this is a change. The H for me stands for honest and really helpful conversations, firstly with myself, but also with people being impacted by the change. The A is about accepting and acknowledging any emotions that come up and appreciating that they're there to teach me something, or to let me know that, you know, I'm letting go of something that I really cared about, but it's no longer relevant, or, you know, that I'm stepping into something that's unfamiliar, but that those emotions are there to be acknowledged and accepted and appreciated. But it's also to notice and celebrate any change that's going on. For me, it's also recognizing when there's change, when that discomfort, instead of that feeling being something I should be fearful of, it's actually, oh my God, I've got this really scary feeling. I feel sick. But actually, that's because growth is just about to happen. The G for me in the word change is all about growth. And for me, the E is also about embracing change. If I can look around and observe change as it's happening, and I can really embrace it on a regular basis, my system doesn't tell this story that change is bad for me. It's like, change is part of life. It's fantastic. But what I also know, if I'm going through lots of changes, plural, I need support. I know that if I've got multiple emotions and multiple levels of change going on, that actually having another human being listen to me and honor and witness what's going on, I can settle those stress chemicals in my body much quicker, much faster, more effectively, which means that I can regain my composure. I can celebrate the change we've been through, the progress that we've made. I can then gain clarity of what the next best step is. I can map out the process between where we are now and the next step and make sure there's not any little mini steps I've got to do. And for every mini step I take, I can celebrate that. And when I've got support, basically those people notice the changes I don't notice, and we celebrate it together and we uplift each other. And that is, you know, for me, how you have clarity and you have confidence in your decision making, is that you understand that when you make a decision, there's a process you've got to go through, and you understand what you need to stay confident through that process. And you understand the impact of the change, and then you have the appropriate support for you, but you're also able to support the people who are going to be impacted by your decisions. So that's it in a nutshell. I've just got something, Doris has got, I'm curious, is for you, there is a difference between appreciation and gratitude. The power of talking out, I think talking about it is another step in the process of making good decisions. Absolutely. And I think some decisions we can make instantly in our system and it's fine, but sometimes talking it out. So me talking to this camera, and it's even great that I've got someone live, and particularly if it's you, Doris, as well. I will say hello to Loretta, who's usually one of my faithfuls here on a Monday. I hope she's well and she's doing well. There is something, even if the other person isn't there to actually physically, excuse me, feedback, just having your own words witnessed is almost like, for me, I take them more seriously. I'm listening more carefully to what I'm saying because I've got somebody else listening with me. So I totally agree that talking out is, for some people, not always. It depends the impact of the decision. Excuse me, I'm gonna have to cough again. Sometimes we need to talk them out, sometimes we don't, but understanding which decisions we do need to talk them out, and what are the symptoms or the signals or the cues that we are trying to do this on our own, i.e. not asking for help, and when we do need to talk it through with somebody in order to get that clarity. And back to that question, are you curious if there's a difference between appreciation and gratitude? The short answer is, I think there must be. Appreciation for me is, it feels more surfacey. For just now, my model for it is there's a and the gratitude feels like a deep gratitude. So it's almost like I have an appreciation of something, and I can appreciation brings it into my awareness. And gratitude is when I really feel it, and it's something I'm learning to do. I realize I've been very good at getting on and doing stuff and making things happen over the years, but I've done that by avoiding how I feel, not acknowledging that I'm scared or afraid, which actually is a really good strategy and it works for me. But sometimes it meant I didn't acknowledge that I didn't really want to do it, or and so it caused stress in my system. So what I'm realizing is I can appreciate something, and and also, there's something about appreciation for me. It seems to be it's external, and it's an appreciation. I can appreciate what it's like for other people by listening to them. I can appreciate the effort that's gone into it. It's very external. But gratitude, it's almost It's when I bring the feeling internally. I'd love to know for you, Doris, if that's the same or different. Appreciation for you is like what, and gratitude for you is like what. Are they the same or different? And I think that appreciation is something that happens before I have gratitude, or at least it did. So, and I'm thinking about the process I go through, this process that's teaching me is like, you first of all, you're appreciating or acknowledging what it is you're grateful for, why you're grateful, and then you're saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's almost like that's taking the time to appreciate something, but it's when you go through that process of appreciating something that then I have a feeling of deep gratitude. So thank you for that question, because now I've got a bit more insight into my own process with appreciation and gratitude. Those of you who are still here at 45 minutes, I want to thank you. And thank you so much. I know when you start watching these videos, if they're longer than you expect them to be, it can be a real pain, especially if you decided to watch a half an hour, 20-minute show, and then it's 45 minutes. But it is what it is. I believe it's of value, and I hope, and I'm okay with my decision. Hopefully you got some value out today, which means we bring us on to the end of the show. And I just want to invite you, now you've been listening to me for a little while about how to make good decisions, what would you like to have happen? How do you need to be for that to happen? And what kind of resource or support might you need? And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, this kind of conversation is really good, I love it. I really want to get much better at decision making, and I want to be more curious about why I don't act on my decisions, and I want to know what happens in between making a decision and being confident to act on it. Or you know that you need more support because you're going through, maybe you're making a big life-changing decision, or you've had a life-changing decision imposed on you, and right now you need support to make that happen. Then I want to just reach out and say to you, please, inbox me, contact me, whether you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, because the Delegate or Ditch Academy is back this Tuesday. We are back Tuesday night. You'd be very welcome to come and meet us. We're a small group at the moment of 4. I'm looking to grow to be 10 this year, and we meet fortnightly for 2 or 3 months, then we have a break, and then we meet again for 2 or 3 months, and we're always working through helping you get clarity of what you want and the confidence to make it happen, but by making sure you've got the support in place when you go through the cycles of change that invariably come as part of any process. When we're making a decision that involves us doing something that's different to what we did before. So if that's something that sounds that would be appeal to you, if you're going, oh my God, I don't have the confidence to be in a group, I don't want to do that, then yes, I still have one-to-one places. So please reach out. If I can be of any help to you this year, my door is open and my heart, and I'll be really ready to listen. So have an amazing week. If I don't see you before, I'll see you again next Monday, where we'll continue the episode about confidence. And right now, I can't remember what the episode's about, but if you keep an eye out, I'll put the link up tomorrow and you'll find out what next week's show's about. Speak to you soon.